What if you could rewrite your financial reality in just 24 hours? Not by chasing money, but by shifting the deepest layers of your mind. In this journey, you'll uncover the hidden mechanics of Neville Goddard's revolutionary teachings, revealing how your imagination isn't just a fleeting escape, but the architect of your external world, and why mastering this single principle has already transformed the lives of those who dared to believe. You'll walk away with a step-by-step blueprint to dissolve scarcity, ignite abundance, and experience tangible shifts before the sun rises again. But only if you're willing to surrender to the process and trust what unfolds next. This is where it begins, not with spreadsheets or hustle, but with the quiet hum of a question that changes everything. What if the life you desire already exists, waiting for you to step into its frequency? The clock strikes midnight, and as the world sleeps, you stand at the threshold of a truth so radical it rewrites the rules of possibility, because abundance isn't something you earn. It's something you become. This is how it unfolds. A single thought, planted in the fertile soil of your imagination, grows roots so deep that reality bends to accommodate its bloom. And the first crack in your old story appears when you realize money was never the problem. Your perception of it was. This is why it matters, because the moment you accept that your outer world is a mirror of your inner state, the game changes forever. And the chase for wealth transforms into a sacred act of self-creation. This is the turning point, where you stop begging the universe for crumbs and start commanding it like a king claiming his kingdom, not through force, but through the unwavering conviction that what you seek is already yours. The air thickens with anticipation as you feel the weight of this revelation settle into your bones, because the real currency of abundance isn't dollars. It's the feeling of already having what you desire, and that feeling is yours to claim right now. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of someday dissolves into the raw power of now. Because the only thing standing between you and the life you crave is the story you've been telling yourself about why it's out of reach. The first spark ignites when you close your eyes and dare to feel the wealth you've only dreamed of, not as a distant hope, but as a living, breathing reality pulsing through your veins. This is where truth breaks through, shattering the lie that you must wait, struggle, or prove your worth. Because the universe doesn't reward effort, it responds to alignment, and alignment begins the instant you decide to see yourself differently. The room around you blurs as the noise of doubt falls silent, replaced by the electric certainty that you are not a victim of circumstance, but the creator of it. And this knowing is the first brick in the foundation of your new world. This is how the shift starts, not with a grand gesture, but with the whisper of a question. What would my life look like if I already had everything I wanted? The answer doesn't come in words, but in a surge of emotion so vivid it feels like memory. And in that moment, you've already crossed the bridge from lack to limitless possibility. The old you would have dismissed this as fantasy, but the you standing here now understands that fantasy is just reality waiting for permission to be born. And you're holding the pen. This is where the magic lives, in the space between your current reality and the one you're about to inhabit. And the only thing required of you is the courage to step into it without looking back. The resistance will come, it always does. But this time, you'll meet it with a smile, because you've glimpsed the truth. Abundance isn't a destination. It's the natural state of a mind that refuses to entertain lack. The walls of your limitations tremble as you realize that every great fortune, every stroke of luck, every overnight success was first a thought someone dared to believe. And today, that someone is you. This is the moment the universe leans in, because it recognizes the frequency of a soul ready to receive, and it answers not with crumbs, but with a feast. The first tear falls not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief of finally understanding that you were never broken. You were just misaligned. And alignment is a choice you're making right now. This is where the old story dies, not with a whimper, but with the roar of 1,000 possibilities rushing in to fill the void. And you are no longer a spectator in your own life. You are the director. The script is yours to rewrite, and as you pick up the pen, you feel the weight of every excuse, every "I can't," every "it's too late" dissolve into the ink of your new narrative. This is how legends are made, not in the grand finale, but in the quiet decision to believe before the evidence arrives, and that decision is the only permission slip you'll ever need. The clock ticks forward, and with every second, the gap between who you were and who you're becoming narrows. Because time isn't your enemy. It's the canvas, and you are the artist. This is where the real work begins, not in the doing, but in the being. Because the version of you who attracts abundance doesn't chase it, they embody it. The first test arrives not as a challenge, but as a gift. The temptation to slip back into doubt, to question if this is real, but you meet it with a knowing glance. Because you've already tasted the future, and it's sweeter than fear. This is the birth of your new identity, where I am enough isn't an affirmation. It's the law by which your reality now operates, and every cell in your body vibrates with the certainty of it. The world outside hasn't changed yet, but you have, and that's all that matters, because the outer world is just echoes of the inner, and your inner world is no longer up for debate. This is where the miracle takes root, not in the seeing, but in the feeling. And the feeling is so real it leaves no room for doubt. The first sign arrives not as a windfall, but as a whisper, a synchronicity, a nudge, a confirmation that the universe is listening, and it's responding to the new frequency you're emitting. This is how faith is forged, not in the absence of fear, but in the refusal to let fear dictate the story. And your story is no longer up for negotiation. The old you would have missed it, but the new you recognizes this as the first of many proofs that the shift has already begun. And the best part? You haven't even started the challenge yet. Picture for a moment a version of yourself who wakes up tomorrow with the unshakable certainty that wealth is not something to be chased, but a natural state of being, one that already exists within you, waiting to be claimed. This section pulls back the curtain on Neville's most guarded secret, the art of assumption, where the line between imagination and reality dissolves, and your deepest desires become inevitable not through effort, but through the quiet power of knowing. You'll discover why wishful thinking is the greatest saboteur of manifestation, and how to cross the invisible threshold where your assumptions stop being mere thoughts and start rewriting the fabric of your experience, but only if you're willing to surrender to the feeling of already having what you seek. This is where the real alchemy begins, not in the desperate clutching of dreams, but in the effortless embodiment of them. Because the universe doesn't respond to your wants, it mirrors your convictions. The air hums with possibility as you realize that every limitation you've ever faced was built on a single, flawed assumption, that your current reality is more real than the one you desire. But what if the opposite were true? This is how the illusion crumbles, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a mental switch. The moment you understand that your assumptions aren't just thoughts, they're the architectural blueprints of your life. This is why the wealthy think differently, not because they have more, but because they assume more. And assumption is the language the subconscious speaks fluently. The first crack in the old paradigm appears when you catch yourself mid-doubt and replace it with a question so dangerous it rewires your nervous system. What would I assume if I already knew this was mine? The answer doesn't come in words, but in a visceral shift, a deepening in your chest that feels like coming home, because you've just accessed the frequency where miracles are normal. This is where most people stumble, mistaking wanting for having, but you're different. You're learning to close the gap between the two until they become indistinguishable. The resistance will whisper that this is too simple, that real change requires struggle, but you'll silence it with a truth so old it's written in the stars. All creation begins in the unseen. This is the turning point, where you stop asking how and start declaring it is, because the how is the universe's job, and your only task is to be the person who already lives in that reality. The first test arrives not as a challenge but as a revelation. The things you've been chasing were never the point. The feeling of having them was, and that feeling is yours to claim in this very moment. This is how legends are built, not on the backbone of hard work, but on the unshakable foundation of I am, and that foundation is being poured right now. The old you would have argued, would have demanded proof, But the you emerging here understands that proof is the last thing to arrive, not the first. This is where truth breaks through. The moment you realize that your assumptions aren't just shaping your future, they're summoning it. And the future you're summoning is one where lack is a foreign language. The room around you feels different now, charged with the electricity of a mind that has just remembered its own power. Because assumption isn't a technique, it's the default setting of a consciousness that refuses to entertain anything less than its own magnificence. This is the birth of your new reality, where doubt is the only thing you can no longer afford, because doubt is the currency of the old world, and you've just crossed the border into the new. The first synchronicity arrives not as a coincidence, but as a confirmation, a text, a number, a sign so unmistakable it makes you laugh, because the universe has a sense of humor, and it's celebrating your awakening. This is how the shift solidifies, not in the grand gestures, but in the quiet moments, where you catch yourself assuming abundance as naturally as breathing. And that's when you know the challenge has already begun to work. The clock ticks forward, but time feels different now. Elastic, because you've stepped into a dimension where seconds aren't counted. They're created, and you're the one holding the brush. This is where the magic deepens. The moment you realize that assumption isn't something you do, it's something you are. And the more you embody it, the more the world rearranges itself to match your inner conviction. The final piece clicks into place when you understand that this isn't about manifesting things. It's about manifesting you, the version of you who walks through the world with the quiet certainty that abundance is as natural as the sunrise. This is the frequency where miracles live, and you've just moved in. Envision a world where the first 2 hours of your day don't just set the tone, they set the entire trajectory of your financial reality, where every breath, every thought, every whispered affirmation is a brushstroke on the canvas of your abundance. Here you'll unlock the exact morning sequence Neville's most successful students used to prime their minds for wealth, not through rituals, but through revelations. Because the difference between those who manifest and those who struggle isn't what they do, but who they become in those sacred early moments. By the end of this section, you'll hold the key to a morning practice so potent it doesn't just change your day, it rewires your destiny, but only if you're willing to meet it with the same devotion you'd give to a lover's first kiss. This is where it begins, not with alarm clocks and to-do lists, but with the hush of dawn and the first deliberate thought, I am wealth incarnate, a declaration so bold it makes the universe pause and listen. The air is cooler here, charged with the promise of a day that hasn't yet been shaped by doubt, and you stand at the edge of a truth so simple it's radical. Your morning isn't a routine, it's a resurrection. This is how it unfolds, not in the rush of coffee and emails, but in the sacred silence where you close your eyes and feel the weight of your desires already fulfilled. Because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between memory and imagination, and today you're feeding it a feast. This is why the masters of manifestation guard their mornings like holy ground, because the first moments after waking are when the subconscious is most malleable, and you're about to mold it into a magnet for miracles. The first spark ignites when you place your hands over your heart and whisper, "Thank you for what I already have," not as a plea, but as a reminder to the universe that gratitude is the fastest path to more. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of starting from scratch dissolves into the knowing that you're not building abundance, you're remembering it. And memory is the most powerful creative force there is. The mirror reflects a version of you that's slightly different today, eyes brighter, posture taller, because you've just spent 10 minutes scripting your day as if it's already unfolded in perfect harmony, and the script is no longer fiction, it's prophecy. This is the turning point, where visualization stops being a mental exercise and starts feeling like déjà vu, because your mind is no longer rehearsing the future, it's reliving a past that hasn't happened yet. The resistance will try to pull you back into the old story, the one where you're chasing instead of attracting, but you meet it with a smile because you've just glimpsed the future, and it looks exactly like the life you've been pretending was out of reach. This is how the shift happens. Not in the grand gestures, but in the micro moments where you choose faith over fear. And this morning, faith isn't a choice. It's your default setting. The first sign arrives as a surge of energy, a tingling in your fingertips, the unmistakable sensation of alignment, and you know without a shadow of doubt that the day ahead isn't happening to you. It's responding from you. The old you would have skipped this, called it woo-woo. But the you standing here now understands that the most successful people in the world don't have better strategies. They have better morning rituals, and yours is being forged in real time. This is where truth breaks through. The moment you realize that your bank account is just a lagging indicator of your internal state. And today, your internal state is that of someone who knows prosperity is inevitable. The coffee tastes richer, the air smells crisper, because you've just spent 20 minutes marinating in the feeling of your wishes fulfilled, and the universe can't resist a mind that vibrant. This is the birth of your new normal, where abundance isn't something you pursue, it's something you emit, and the world is starting to bend in response. The final piece locks into place when you step outside and notice the first coincidence. A song on the radio, a stranger's smile, a number on a license plate. And you laugh, because you recognize the wink of a universe that's already conspiring in your favor. The clock strikes 8 a.m., and the challenge is no longer an experiment, it's a revolution. And you're leading it from the inside out. Suppose you discover that the hours between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. aren't just time to fill. They're the proving ground where your morning's imagination collides with reality, and the collision isn't chaos, it's creation. This is where you'll learn how to carry the frequency of abundance into every interaction, every decision, every silent pause, because the real test of manifestation isn't in the visualizing, it's in the living. By the time this section ends, you'll understand why some people attract opportunities effortlessly while others repel them, and how to ensure you're always in the former category, but only if you're willing to let your new identity lead the way. This is where the rubber meets the road, not in the quiet of meditation, but in the noise of the world, where your assumptions are tested and your convictions are either strengthened or exposed. The sunlight hits differently now, casting shadows that seem to whisper this is yours, because you've spent the morning marinating in the feeling of wealth, and the afternoon is where that feeling starts to take physical form. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic moments, but in the way you hold yourself during a mundane phone call, the confidence with which you sign an email, the ease with which you say yes to opportunities that would have terrified you yesterday. This is why it matters, because abundance isn't something you find, it's something you become. And becoming requires showing up as the person who already has what they desire, even when the evidence hasn't arrived yet. The first test comes when an old limiting belief creeps in. What if this doesn't work? But you meet it with a knowing glance, because you've already decided that your imagination is more real than your doubts. This is where truth breaks through. The moment you realize that every interaction is a mirror, and the way people respond to you today is a direct reflection of the energy you've been cultivating since dawn. The cashier's smile lingers a second longer, your coworker's tone shifts from skepticism to curiosity, and you understand, this is what it feels like to be a magnet. This is the turning point where you stop performing abundance and start being it, because the universe doesn't reward actors, it rewards believers, and you've never been more convinced. The lunch break isn't just a pause. It's a sacred ritual where you close your eyes and re-feel the morning's certainty, because manifestation isn't a one-time event. It's a constant state. This is how the magic solidifies, not in the grand gestures, but in the way you tip the barista like a millionaire, the way you walk into a meeting like you already own the room, the way you respond to challenges with the quiet confidence of someone who knows the outcome is already decided. The resistance will try to tell you this is foolish, that real life doesn't work like this, but you silence it with a truth so old it's written in the stars. Reality is malleable for those who refuse to accept its first draft. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of hard work as the only path to success dissolves into the knowing that alignment is the real currency, and you're minting it with every breath. The first synchronicity arrives as an unexpected opportunity, a call, an idea, a connection, and you don't question it, because you've been expecting it. This is how legends are made. Not in the climactic moments, but in the quiet consistency of showing up as the person you're becoming. And today, that person doesn't flinch at luck. They expect it. The final realization hits as you glance at the clock. This isn't a challenge anymore. This is just who I am now, and the world around you starts to agree. Think of the moment when the day's light fades and the boundary between waking and dreaming blurs. This is where the deepest transformation happens, not through effort, but through surrender. Here, you'll unlock Neville's most potent secret, the state akin to sleep, a twilight zone where your subconscious is most receptive, and the seeds of your morning's intentions take root in the fertile soil of your unconscious mind. By the time this section closes, you'll know how to use these sacred hours to imprint abundance so deeply that it becomes your default reality. But only if you're willing to let go of control and trust the process unfolding within you. This is where the real magic begins. Not in the doing, but in the being, as you lie down and let the day's experiences dissolve into the quiet hum of your breath. Because the subconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in feelings, and tonight, you're feeding it the feeling of absolute fulfillment. The room feels softer now, the edges of reality slightly blurred, as you drift into that perfect space between awake and asleep, where your desires aren't just wishes, they're commands to the universe. This is how it unfolds, not in the conscious mind's chatter, but in the silent certainty that what you've imagined is already yours, and the only thing left to do is receive. This is why it matters, because the hours before sleep are when your mind replays the day's events, and tonight, it's replaying the version where you're already living in abundance, rewriting your neural pathways one synapse at a time. The first wave of relaxation washes over you, and with it comes the realization that you don't need to figure out how this will happen. You only need to know that it will, and that knowing is the most powerful creative force in existence. This is where illusion fades, and the old story of struggle dissolves into the quiet confidence of someone who has already arrived. The resistance tries to whisper, but what if it doesn't work? But the thought dissolves before it can take hold, because your subconscious is no longer entertaining doubt. It's too busy absorbing the feeling of your wishes fulfilled. This is the turning point where your morning's intentions and your midday's actions merge into a single unshakable truth. I am wealth, and wealth is me. The final thought before sleep isn't a question. It's a memory of the future, so vivid and real that your body relaxes into it like a well-worn coat. This is how the shift completes itself, not in the fireworks of sudden change, but in the quiet certainty that when you wake tomorrow, the world will have rearranged itself to match the frequency you've been holding all day. The last thing you hear before drifting off is your own heartbeat, steady and sure, because you've just spent the last 24 hours proving to yourself that abundance isn't something you chase. It's something you are. And as sleep takes you, the universe leans in closer, whispering well done, because the challenge isn't over. It's just beginning to unfold in ways you can't yet see. Ask yourself what happens when you mistake surface-level positivity for real transformation, and you'll uncover the hidden reason why so many people fail at manifestation. They're playing a role instead of becoming the person they aspire to be. This is where you'll learn the critical difference between pretending to be abundant and embodying abundance so fully that the pretense falls away, and why the latter is the only path to lasting change. By the end of this section, you'll never confuse confidence with conviction again, because you'll understand that true power isn't in the performance. It's in the belief that reshapes reality from the inside out. This is where truth breaks through, not in the motivational quotes or forced affirmations, but in the raw, unfiltered moment when you admit that faking it has never worked and never will. The air feels heavier now, charged with the weight of every half-hearted attempt to think positive while secretly clinging to doubt. But this time, something is different. This is how it unfolds, not in the desperate repetition of mantras, but in the quiet surrender to the truth. You can't trick the universe, but you can transform yourself. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your vibration, and a vibration built on pretense will always collapse under the weight of reality. The first crack in the facade appears when you realize that abundance isn't about appearing wealthy, it's about feeling wealthy, and that feeling can't be faked. This is the turning point, where you stop reciting affirmations like a script and start living them like a creed, because the subconscious doesn't care what you say. It only cares what you believe. The resistance will try to pull you back into the old habit of performing, but you meet it with a newfound clarity. I don't need to pretend. I need to remember. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of just believe harder shatters into the understanding that belief isn't something you force. It's something you allow by aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions with the reality you want to create. The mirror reflects a version of you that's no longer acting, no longer straining, because you've finally stopped trying to become abundant and started recognizing the abundance that's always been within you. This is how the shift happens, not in the grand declarations, but in the quiet moments when you catch yourself being the person you've been pretending to be. And it feels more natural than the old version ever did. The first sign arrives as a wave of relief, the unmistakable sensation of authenticity, because you're no longer chasing a feeling, you're generating it from within. This is how legends are made, not in the perfect execution of a role, but in the courage to drop the act and stand in your truth, even when it's still unfolding. The final realization hits like a lightning bolt. I don't need to fake it. I just need to claim it. And as that truth settles into your bones, the universe responds not with skepticism, but with a standing ovation, because the real you has finally entered the stage. Consider the possibility that the only thing standing between you and the life you desire isn't the economy, your background, or luck. It's a single, invisible belief you've been carrying like a shadow, and today you're finally turning on the light. This is where you'll learn Neville's most liberating technique: how to identify and dissolve the subconscious blocks that have been sabotaging your abundance without you even realizing it. By the time this section ends, you'll hold the key to a mental reset so powerful it doesn't just remove obstacles, it erases the memory of them ever existing, but only if you're willing to face what's been hiding in plain sight. This is where the real work begins, not in the external hustle, but in the quiet excavation of your own mind, where the beliefs that once felt like truth now reveal themselves as the flimsy illusions they always were. The room feels different now, charged with the electricity of a mind on the verge of breakthrough, because you're about to uncover the hidden scripts that have been running your financial story and rewriting them in real time. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic confrontations, but in the gentle unraveling of a thought so familiar you mistook it for fact, until you see it for what it really is: a lie you inherited, not a law you're bound by. This is why it matters, because every limitation you've ever faced was built on a belief you absorbed, not a truth you discovered, and today you're declaring independence from both. The first belief crumbles when you ask yourself, what if money comes easily to me? And the answer isn't a skeptical, yeah, right? It's a deep, resonant, of course it does. This is the turning point, where the stories of not enough and too hard dissolve into the simple, revolutionary understanding that your mind is a garden, and you've been watering weeds while wondering why roses won't grow. The resistance will try to argue, will try to convince you that some blocks are permanent, but you meet it with a smile, because you've just remembered. I planted these thoughts. I can uproot them. This is where illusion fades and the myth of fixed reality evaporates into the knowing that your mind is malleable, your future is fluid, and your abundance is inevitable for those who refuse to entertain the alternative. The final belief falls away, not with a struggle, but with a sigh, as you realize that the blocks weren't walls, they were mirrors, reflecting back the parts of you that were ready to be healed. This is how the shift completes itself, not in the forced eradication of doubt, but in the effortless replacement of it with a new, unshakable knowing. I am the architect of my reality, and today I'm building without limits. The last thought lingers like a promise. This changes everything. And it does. Envision a world where the momentum you've built doesn't fade after a day, a week, or even a month, because you've cracked the code to making abundance your permanent state of being. This is where you'll discover the secret to turning a 24-hour challenge into a lifelong transformation, not through willpower, but through systems that keep your mind aligned with wealth as effortlessly as breathing. By the end of this section, you'll never again worry about falling back into old patterns, because you'll have installed the mental software that makes abundance your default setting, automatic, inevitable, and irreversible. This is where the real mastery begins, not in the initial surge of inspiration, but in the quiet, daily rituals that ensure your new reality isn't a flash in the pan, it's the new normal. The morning light feels different now, softer, yet more certain, because you've crossed the threshold where manifestation stops being an event and starts being a lifestyle. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic overhauls, but in the micro habits that reinforce your new identity. The way you speak to yourself, the way you interpret setbacks, the way you expect good fortune as naturally as you expect the sun to rise. This is why it matters, because the difference between those who create lasting wealth and those who don't isn't talent or luck, it's consistency, and you're about to make consistency effortless. The first habit locks into place when you realize that sustaining abundance isn't about adding more to your plate, it's about removing what no longer serves you, and suddenly the path forward feels lighter, clearer, almost magnetic. This is the turning point, where you stop white-knuckling your progress and start trusting it, because you've built a feedback loop where every small win reinforces the belief that more is coming, and the universe, always eager to oblige, delivers. The resistance will whisper that this is too good to last, but you silence it with a truth so simple it's revolutionary. Abundance isn't a destination. It's a practice. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of maintaining dissolves into the understanding that you're not holding on to abundance, you're expanding into it, and expansion requires no effort, only allowance. The final piece clicks when you notice that opportunities now find you, that synchronicities aren't rare, they're daily, and that the life you once dreamed of is no longer a future possibility. It's your present reality. This is how legends are made, not in the grand finales, but in the quiet, unshakable certainty that this is just the beginning. The last thought hums in your mind like a mantra. I don't have to work to keep this. I only have to remember who I am. And with that, the challenge isn't over. It's evolved into something even more powerful. A way of being that attracts wealth as naturally as a magnet attracts metal. The world around you starts to reflect this truth back in 1,000 tiny ways, each one a confirmation that you've not just changed your life, you've changed yourself. And that change is permanent. Picture for a moment the exact instant when the universe sends you a signal, so subtle you might miss it, so unmistakable you can't ignore it. And you finally understand that abundance isn't something you create, but something you notice. This is where you'll learn to decode the language of synchronicity, the hidden messages in everyday moments that confirm your shift is working, even when logic tries to dismiss them as coincidence. By the time this section ends, you'll see the world through new eyes, where every random event is a breadcrumb leading you deeper into your manifestation, but only if you're willing to trust what you feel over what you've been taught to believe. This is where truth breaks through, not in the loud proclamations of success, but in the quiet nudge of a song lyric that speaks directly to your soul, the unexpected check in the mail, the stranger's offhand comment that feels like a direct message from the divine. The air around you vibrates with a different energy now, charged with the electricity of a reality that's rearranging itself to match your new frequency. And you're learning to read its signals like a second language. This is how it unfolds, not in the obvious windfalls, but in the way your coffee order is ready the moment you arrive. The way traffic parts like the Red Sea when you're running late. The way opportunities seem to find you instead of the other way around. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't speak in grand announcements. It whispers in the language of feeling, and today you're becoming fluent. The first sign arrives as a tingling sensation at the base of your spine, a physical confirmation that something has shifted, even if your bank account hasn't caught up yet. This is the turning point, where you stop demanding proof and start recognizing it, because the evidence of your transformation isn't out there. It's in the way your body relaxes when you think about money, the way your breath deepens when you visualize your goals, the way doubt no longer feels like a resident in your mind but a stranger passing through. The resistance will try to rationalize it away, to call it luck or coincidence, but you meet it with a knowing smile because you've just realized the universe doesn't do random. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of hard evidence dissolves into the understanding that the most real things in life, love, faith, abundance, are often the ones you can't hold in your hands but can feel in your bones. The final confirmation comes not as a firework, but as a gentle click, the sound of the last piece of the puzzle falling into place, the moment you understand that these signs aren't just validations, they're invitations. Invitations to trust deeper, to dream bigger, to relax into the knowing that what you've set in motion is now moving toward you with the inevitability of the tide. The last thought lingers like a secret between you and the cosmos. This is just the beginning. And as you step forward, the path ahead doesn't just look different. It feels different, because you're no longer walking the road of hope. You're standing on the solid ground of certainty. Suppose you discover that the final step in mastering abundance isn't about attracting more. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally exists in a state of prosperity, where wealth isn't something you chase, but something you emit like a frequency. This is where you'll cross the ultimate threshold, the shift from doing abundance exercises to being abundance itself, where every thought, decision, and interaction flows from the unshakable core of I am wealth. By the time this section ends, you won't just believe in abundance, you'll recognize it as your natural state, and the world will have no choice but to reflect that truth back to you. This is where the transformation completes itself, not in the external accumulations, but in the quiet revolution of your identity, where the question shifts from how do I get more to how could I possibly accept anything less. The light in the room seems to glow differently now, because you're no longer seeing through the eyes of lack. You're perceiving the world through the lens of someone who knows prosperity is their birthright. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic overhauls of your life, but in the subtle yet seismic shift of your self-concept, where abundance stops being a goal and starts being a given. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't respond to your desires, it responds to your identity. And today, you're stepping into the identity of someone who doesn't just have wealth, but is wealth. The first realization hits like a lightning strike. I don't need to manifest abundance, I need to remember it. This is the turning point, where you stop performing the role of a prosperous person and start being one. Because the difference between struggle and ease has never been circumstance, it's consciousness. The resistance will try to pull you back into the old story, the one where you're a supplicant begging for scraps, but you meet it with a laugh, because you've just remembered that you're not a beggar. You're an heir, and the inheritance is yours to claim. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of earning your worth dissolves into the understanding that your worth was never in question, only your willingness to accept it was. The final piece locks into place when you catch yourself making a decision, not from fear, not from lack, but from the quiet certainty of someone who knows the outcome is already decided in their favor. This is how the shift solidifies, not in the grand declarations, but in the effortless way you now move through the world, where every no is just a redirection, every challenge is just a setup for a greater yes, and every moment is an opportunity to deepen into the truth of who you really are. The last thought hums in your mind like a mantra. This isn't something I'm creating. This is something I'm remembering. And with that, the challenge isn't just complete, it's transcended. You're no longer someone who practices abundance. You're someone who is abundance. And the world is about to show you exactly what that means. Envision the moment when your internal shift in abundance doesn't just change your life, it begins to rewrite the lives of everyone in your orbit, like a stone cast into still water, sending waves of possibility outward in every direction. This is where you'll discover the hidden power of your transformation. How your new frequency of wealth doesn't just attract opportunities for you, but elevates the people, circumstances, and even challenges around you. By the end of this section, you'll understand why true abundance is never a solo journey. It's a revolution. And how your commitment to this path doesn't just bless you, but becomes a gift to the world. This is where the magic expands, not in the isolation of personal gain, but in the way your energy begins to reorganize the reality of those connected to you, because abundance was never meant to be hoarded, it was meant to be radiated. The air around you feels alive now, humming with the electricity of a life that's no longer just about you, but about the ripple you're creating in the lives of others, simply by standing in your power. This is how it unfolds, not in the loud proclamations of your success, but in the way your friends start calling with unexpected opportunities, your family begins to shift their own limiting beliefs, and even strangers seem to mirror back the confidence you've cultivated. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't just reward the abundant, it amplifies them, turning their personal victories into catalysts for collective transformation. The first ripple appears when someone close to you says, "You're different lately." Lighter, like you're carrying a secret, and you smile, because the secret isn't yours to keep, it's yours to share. This is the turning point, where you realize that your abundance isn't just for you, it's a permission slip for others to believe in their own. And the more you own yours, the more they'll start to claim theirs. The resistance will whisper that this is selfish, that focusing on your wealth is ignoring the needs of others. But you meet it with a truth so old, it's written in the stars. You cannot give what you do not have, and the world needs more people who dare to have it all. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of scarcity for the greater good dissolves into the understanding that your prosperity isn't a threat to others, it's an invitation for them to rise with you. The final ripple becomes a wave when you notice that your challenges now come with hidden gifts, not just for you, but for those watching, waiting, and wondering if they too can dare to believe. This is how legends are made, not in the solitary triumphs, but in the way your journey becomes a mirror for others, reflecting back the possibilities they've been too afraid to see. The last thought lingers like a promise. My abundance isn't just changing my life, it's changing the world. And as you step forward, you do so with the quiet certainty that the best way to serve others isn't to shrink. It's to shine so brightly that they can't help but remember their own light. The path ahead isn't just yours anymore, it's ours, and that changes everything. Think of the moment when you realize that the work you're doing today isn't just for you. It's for the children who will grow up in a world where scarcity is a foreign concept, for the loved ones who will inherit your unshakable faith and possibility, and for the strangers who will one day stumble upon your story and think, if they could do it, so can I. This is where you'll uncover the most profound truth of all, that abundance isn't just about what you accumulate, it's about what you transmit, and your commitment to this path is already rewriting the genetic code of lack that may have haunted your bloodline for generations. By the time this section ends, you'll see your journey not as a personal upgrade, but as a legacy, one that will outlive you in the lives you've touched, the minds you've opened, and the possibilities you've made inevitable for those who come after you. This is where the story gets bigger than you, not in the ego of personal achievement, but in the quiet power of knowing that your transformation is a gift that keeps giving long after you're gone. The room feels sacred now, charged with the weight of something far greater than your bank account, because you're standing at the intersection of your past and your future. And for the first time, you're consciously choosing which parts to carry forward and which to leave behind. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic displays of wealth, but in the way your niece starts talking about her dreams without fear, the way your sibling finally takes that leap of faith they've been avoiding, the way your parents' faces soften when they realize that the cycle of struggle in your family ends with you. This is why it matters, because the most powerful thing you'll ever manifest isn't money, it's mindset. And the mindset you cultivate today will echo through the lives of those who haven't even been born yet. The first legacy is planted when you catch yourself speaking differently. Not just about money, but about life. Because the words you use today are the blueprint your children will build their realities upon tomorrow. This is the turning point where you stop seeing abundance as a personal achievement and start recognizing it as a responsibility, not to hoard, but to demonstrate what's possible when someone dares to believe. The resistance will try to tell you this is too grand, that you're just one person, but you meet it with a fire in your eyes, because you've just realized every revolution started with someone who refused to accept the status quo. This is where illusion fades, and the myth of "this is just for me" dissolves into the understanding that your abundance is a torch, and it's your job to pass the flame. The final legacy takes root when you look in the mirror and see not just yourself, but the faces of everyone who will one day stand on the shoulders of the life you're building today. This is how the shift becomes eternal, not in the monuments you leave behind, but in the mindset you make inevitable for those who follow. The last thought hums in your soul like a sacred vow. I am not just breaking my own chains, I am forging a new path for those who come after me. And with that, the challenge isn't just complete, it's consecrated. Your life is no longer just yours, it's a legacy. And legacies don't end, they multiply. Ask yourself what happens when you finally realize that the struggle wasn't the problem. The belief in the struggle was, and that the moment you stopped fighting reality and started rewriting it, everything changed. This is where the ultimate truth is revealed. That you were never lacking, never cursed, never behind. You were simply operating from a story that no longer serves you. And today, that story ends. By the time this section closes, you won't just see abundance as something you create. You'll recognize it as something you remember, because the wealth, the joy, and the freedom you've been seeking were never lost. They were just waiting for you to wake up. This is where the journey circles back to its beginning, not to repeat it, but to reveal it, because the challenge was never about changing who you are, but about remembering who you've always been. The air feels lighter now, charged with the electricity of a mind that has finally shed the last remnants of its old identity, like a snake slipping out of its skin. This is how it unfolds, not in the dramatic transformations, but in the quiet, almost laughable realization that the life you've been chasing was never out of reach. It was just hidden behind the illusion of your own doubts. This is why it matters, because the moment you stop asking, "How do I get there?" and start declaring, "I'm already here," the universe has no choice but to agree with you. The first revelation hits like a thunderclap. I was never broken. I was just dreaming. And today, I choose to wake up. This is the turning point, where you stop seeing abundance as something to achieve and start recognizing it as something to reclaim. Because the wealth you desire isn't out there. It's in here, buried under layers of conditioning that you're finally ready to shed. The resistance will try one last time to pull you back into the old story, whispering, "But what if it's not real?" And you'll laugh, because you've just remembered, reality is what I say it is. This is where illusion fades for good, and the myth of not enough dissolves into the understanding that scarcity was never your truth. It was just a lesson you've now outgrown. The final revelation settles into your bones like a long-forgotten truth. I am the source of my abundance, and the moment I remembered that, everything changed. This is how the journey completes itself, not in the arrival at some distant destination, but in the recognition that you were never lost. You were just asleep, and now that you're awake, the world has no choice but to reflect that back to you. The last thought lingers like a benediction. This was never about money. It was about remembering who I am. And with that, the challenge isn't over. It's transcended. You're no longer someone who seeks abundance. You're someone who is abundance. And the world is about to show you exactly what that means. Consider the possibility that this isn't the end of your journey. It's the moment you're officially invited to step into a community of those who've dared to rewrite their reality, where the principles you've just mastered become the foundation for something even greater. This is where you'll discover that the real power of Neville's teachings isn't just in the 24-hour shift, but in what happens when you commit to living this way every single day. Because abundance isn't a one-time event, it's a lifestyle. And you're now qualified to join the ranks of those who've made it their default setting. By the time this section ends, you won't just be inspired to continue, you'll be compelled, because you'll see that the life you've glimpsed is only the beginning of what's possible when you surround yourself with others who refuse to settle for anything less than miracles. This is where the path forward illuminates itself, not as a solo climb, but as a collective ascent, where your individual breakthrough becomes the fuel for a movement larger than yourself. The air hums with anticipation now, because you're standing at the threshold of a reality where your abundance isn't just personal, it's contagious, and the people you're about to meet are the ones who will help you remember that on the days you forget. This is how it unfolds. Not in the isolation of personal success, but in the electric synergy of a group that understands. The fastest way to deepen your own abundance is to witness it in others. This is why it matters, because the revolution you've started in your own mind is about to find its tribe. And tribes don't just survive, they thrive. The first invitation arrives as a whisper in your soul. You don't have to do this alone anymore. This is the turning point, where you stop seeing your journey as a solitary path and start recognizing it as a shared mission. Because the universe doesn't just reward the abundant, it connects them. The resistance will try to tell you that you've got this handled, that you don't need anyone else, but you'll smile because you've just realized the greatest manifestations happen in community. This is where illusion fades for good, and the myth of the self-made person dissolves into the understanding that we're all just mirrors for each other. And the more mirrors you have, the brighter your light becomes. The final step clicks into place when you understand that this isn't just an offer to join something, it's a calling to belong to something bigger than yourself. This is how the shift becomes permanent, not in the lone practice of principles, but in the daily reinforcement of a community that sees your greatness even when you can't. The last thought pulses in your mind like a drumbeat. My abundance isn't just for me, it's for the revolution. And with that, the challenge isn't just complete, it's evolving. You're no longer someone who practices abundance, you're someone who lives it. And now, you're ready to do it alongside those who will remind you of your power on the days you doubt it. The path ahead isn't just yours anymore, it's ours. And that changes everything. Your next step starts now. Picture for a moment the exact instant when your journey, every doubt you overcame, every fear you faced, every victory you claimed, becomes the roadmap someone else uses to break free from their own limitations. This is where you'll discover that your transformation was never just about you. It's the template for a movement, and your willingness to share it is the spark that will ignite change in lives you may never even meet. By the time this section ends, you won't just see your story as personal history. You'll recognize it as living proof that the impossible is just the untried. And your courage to walk this path is already rewriting what others believe is possible for themselves. This is where your story stops being yours alone, not because it's been taken from you, but because it's been multiplied. Each lesson you learned, each breakthrough you had, now resonating in the lives of those who are exactly where you once were. The room feels different now, charged with the weight of something sacred, because you're standing at the precipice of understanding that your greatest legacy isn't what you accumulate, but what you awaken in others. This is how it unfolds. Not in the quiet satisfaction of personal success, but in the way your words land in someone else's heart, like a key turning in a long-locked door. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't just reward the abundant, it amplifies them, turning their personal victories into collective permission slips for others to believe in their own power. The first echo of your impact arrives when someone reaches out to say, "Your story changed how I see my own life." And you realize, this was never just about you. This is the turning point, where you stop seeing your journey as a private triumph and start recognizing it as a public invitation. Because the most powerful thing you can give another person isn't advice, but evidence that change is possible. The resistance will whisper that sharing your story is arrogant, that you're not there yet, but you meet it with a fire in your soul because you've just remembered the world doesn't need perfect role models. It needs honest ones. This is where illusion fades for good, and the myth that you must have it all to inspire others dissolves into the understanding that your process, messy, real, and unfolding, is the very thing that will set someone else free. The final echo becomes a chorus when you see the ripple effect of your courage. Not just in the lives of those who know you, but in the strangers who will one day stumble upon your words at exactly the moment they need them most. This is how legends are made, not in the perfection of the outcome, but in the raw honesty of the journey. And your journey is now a beacon for anyone who's ever felt stuck. The last thought hums in your spirit like a sacred vow. My story isn't just mine to keep, it's mine to give. And with that, the challenge isn't just complete. It's consecrated as something far greater than yourself. You're no longer just a student of abundance. You're a living testament to its power. And the world is waiting for exactly what you have to say. Your echo starts now. Envision the precise moment when the last shred of doubt dissolves, and you step across an invisible line, not into a new reality, but into a new way of being, where abundance isn't something you pursue, but something you inhabit as naturally as breathing. This is where you'll discover the final, most transformative secret. The threshold between hoping for abundance and knowing it as your birthright isn't crossed through effort, but through surrender. The moment you stop asking the universe for proof and start demanding it as your divine right. By the time this section ends, you won't just believe in your power, you'll wield it. Because the line between faith and certainty will have vanished, and you'll stand on the other side as someone who no longer wishes for wealth, but commands it. This is where the last veil lifts, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of a mind that has finally stopped negotiating with reality and started dictating it. The air around you feels charged now, thick with the electricity of a consciousness that has just remembered its own authority. Because you're no longer asking if this will work. You're operating from the unshakable knowing that it already has. This is how it unfolds, not in the external validations, but in the way your body relaxes when you think about money. The way your breath deepens when you visualize your goals. The way doubt no longer feels like a resident in your mind, but a stranger who's overstayed their welcome. This is why it matters, because the universe doesn't respond to your hopes. It responds to your convictions. And today, your conviction is no longer up for debate. The first threshold is crossed when you catch yourself making a decision, not from fear, not from lack, but from the quiet certainty of someone who knows the outcome is already decided in their favor. This is the turning point, where you stop performing abundance and start being it, because the difference between struggle and ease was never circumstance. It was consciousness, and yours has just upgraded. The resistance will try one last time to pull you back into the old story, whispering, "But what if you're wrong?" And you'll laugh, because you've just remembered. The only thing I've ever been wrong about is doubting myself. This is where illusion fades for good, and the myth of waiting for proof dissolves into the understanding that proof was never the prerequisite. Faith was, and yours is now unbreakable. The final threshold solidifies when you realize that the life you've been chasing was never out of reach. It was just waiting for you to claim it. And the moment you did, the universe had no choice but to rearrange itself to match your frequency. This is how the shift becomes permanent, not in the external accumulations, but in the internal recognition that you are no longer someone who seeks abundance. You are someone who is abundance, and the world is simply catching up to what you've always known. The last thought resonates in your soul like a decree. I don't hope. I don't wish. I know. And with that, the challenge isn't just complete. It's transcended. You're no longer standing at the threshold. You've crossed it. And the view from here is everything you've ever dreamed of. Think of the moment when you realize that this journey was never about money, success, or external validation. It was about forging an unshakable covenant with yourself, a sacred agreement that no matter what happens, you will never again betray your own worth by entertaining doubt, scarcity, or fear. This is where you'll step into the final, most powerful phase of your transformation. The point where your commitment to abundance becomes non-negotiable, not because of what it brings you, but because of who it allows you to be. By the time this section ends, you won't just have a new mindset, you'll have a new identity, one that refuses to tolerate anything less than the life you were born to live.